Seth, let's make this real. If you fail, you shave your head right here live. Those weren't just words. They were a public challenge from the president. When Seth Meyers accepted, the stage was set for a confrontation unlike anything the audience had ever seen. The result? A shocking, unforgettable showdown. For weeks, the world had been buzzing with the rumors so strange, so impossible sounding that most people didn't take it seriously. It began quietly, whispered in corners, shared in hushed tones, but it spread faster than anyone expected. The claim? That Barron, Donald Trump's youngest child, might not be the son of Donald and Melania, but instead the child of Donald and his own daughter, Ivanka. Most people laughed it off. They called it ridiculous, absurd, and obvious fabrication. But man did not. Donald Trump, the sitting president in 2025, did not ignore it. Trump had always been a man of intensity. Small slights, rumors, or challenges never passed him quietly. He thrived on confrontation, on proving people wrong, on showing confidence when others doubted him. And now this rumor, no matter how bizarre, had hit a nerve. At first, he tried ignoring it. He tweeted. He joked in private meetings. He moved on to other topics. But the whispers didn't stop. The stories grew louder. The images circulated. And suddenly, what began as an obscure rumor had found its way into mainstream conversation. For Trump, that was unacceptable. Rumors weren't just harmless gossip. They were challengers. They questioned him. They questioned his family. And above all, they threatened the image he had built over decades. And so, in typical Trump fashion, he decided to confront it directly. He issued a challenge. Not a press release, not a speech, not a statement through intermediaries, but a direct call aimed at one person, Seth Meyers. Seth Meyers, the late-night host, known for his biting humor, clever commentary, and willingness to mock anyone in the public eye. For weeks, Meyers had made jokes, subtle and not so subtle, about the rumors. He didn't report them as facts. No, he treated them as punchlines. But in Trump's eyes, even laughter was a threat. People were paying attention. People were questioning. And Trump refused to let humor control the narrative about him and his family. The challenge was simple and yet terrifying in its implications. Trump publicly stated, "If Seth Meyers really thinks he's funny, let him face me live one." No scripts, no edits, just truth. The words were clear, confident, and unyielding. It wasn't an invitation. It was a gauntlet thrown. The meaning was unmistakable. Show up, Seth. Face me, and whatever happens, happens. In the open, where everyone can see. The public reaction was immediate. Social media exploded with speculation. Interviews discussed the challenge endlessly, and people debated what it meant for Meyers and the president. Some wondered if Meyers would even accept. After all, the stakes weren't small. Trump had built a reputation for never backing down, for turning challenges into spectacles, and for using moments like this to dominate attention. For Meyers, agreeing meant stepping into a whirlwind of scrutiny, tension, and unpredictability. And yet, Meyers did accept. The decision didn't come lightly. He knew he was stepping into dangerous territory, where humor and truth would collide and where a single misstep could make him the target of ridicule or worse. But Meyers also understood something important. The chance to confront someone like Trump on his own terms, live and unedited, was rare. It was a moment to do more than joke. It was a moment to hold a public figure accountable, to speak directly to the audience about the absurdity, the contradictions, and the stakes of the situation. The atmosphere in the days leading up to the event was tense. Everyone knew the rumor would be addressed. Everyone anticipated the jokes, the comebacks, the arguments, the tension. But what no one could predict was the intensity of the emotions involved. Trump's anger simmered beneath the surface, fueled not just by the rumor itself, but by the challenge to his authority, his persona, and his family's privacy. For Trump, this wasn't a comedy sketch. It wasn't light entertainment. It was a test of power, control, and perception. Meanwhile, Seth Meyers prepared in his own way. He read reports, collected clips, and rehearsed not just jokes, but strategies. He thought carefully about what to say, how to say it, and how to react. Every word mattered. Every expression, every pause, every choice of timing could tip the balance. The challenge was no longer about humor alone. It had become about nerves, judgment, and public perception. As the day approached, the anticipation reached a fever pitch. People who had dismissed the rumor were now watching closely, not because they believed it, but because they were drawn to the tension, the uncertainty, the possibility of witnessing something unprecedented. There was an electric sense in the air, a feeling that once this confrontation began, nothing would be the same. Trump's decision to confront the rumor so directly and Meyers' choice to accept created a rare cultural moment. Two figures, both confident, both unafraid, standing at opposite ends of a stage, one fueled by anger, the other by wit. The public could feel it even before the cameras turned on. It was more than a rumor, more than comedy, more than politics. It was a collision of personalities, of stakes, of human emotion, and of truth itself. And so, the stage was set. The gauntlet had been thrown. The challenge had been accepted. And, for everyone waiting, a single thought echoed in their minds. Whatever happened next would be unforgettable. When Seth Meyers accepted Donald Trump's challenge, the world collectively leaned in. The moment was no longer just a rumor or a late-night joke. It had become a high-stakes confrontation, one that everyone wanted to witness. People speculated endlessly. Could Meyers hold his ground against the sitting president? Could Trump maintain his composure under direct questioning? The answers would not come slowly. They would happen all at once, live in front of millions. The day of the challenge arrived with an unusual weight in the air. Even before Meyers stepped on stage, whispers and headlines suggested this wouldn't be an ordinary encounter. The challenge itself was simple, almost absurd in its clarity, yet terrifying in its implications. Trump had framed the rules with precision. Seth, let's make this real. If you can prove any of your little rumors true, I'll publicly apologize. But if you fail, you shave your head right here, live. The words were shocking, bold, and audacious. On the surface, it sounded almost playful, like a late-night dare, but the weight of them was heavy. A live, unedited confrontation with the potential for public humiliation dangling over Meyers' head. The challenge wasn't just a test of wit, it was a test of courage, nerve, and presence. Seth Meyers knew exactly what he was stepping into. He wasn't just walking into a comedy sketch, he was stepping into a pressure cooker of public attention. A situation where every glance, every word, and every expression mattered. Millions would judge him, scrutinize him, and dissect his every reaction. One slip could become a viral moment of ridicule, and one sharp response could turn him into a symbol of boldness. There was no room for error, and yet there was opportunity. An opportunity to expose truth, to challenge authority, and to turn a rumor into a meaningful conversation. About accountability, the tension built before the cameras even started rolling. Everyone waiting knew that this was no ordinary debate. Trump had a reputation for dominance, for taking the upper hand in any confrontation, and for turning moments like this into spectacles. But Meyers had a different strength: preparation, composure, and the ability to combine humor with sharp observation. The stakes had never been higher, and both men understood that the world was watching their every move. When the live confrontation began, the air was electric. Trump leaned into his familiar persona, confident, slightly smirking, exuding the assurance that had carried him through decades of public scrutiny. Meyers responded with a mix of humor and seriousness, careful not to underestimate the challenge, but equally determined to not appear intimidated. At first, the exchange felt almost lighthearted, a dance of words with laughter and subtle digs. But underneath the smiles, there was a tension that crackled, an unspoken understanding that this was more than a joke. Trump, true to his style, raised the stakes again. He didn't allow the challenge to remain abstract. He framed it as a clear, almost threatening condition. Success for Meyers meant an apology. Failure meant a public, unmistakable consequence. The audience, whether in the room or watching at home, felt the weight of it. Every statement, every rebuttal, carried the potential for dramatic fallout. Meyers' acceptance of the challenge now felt both brave and dangerous. As the exchange progressed, the audience could sense the careful balance being struck. Meyers had to navigate between humor and seriousness, observation and confrontation. Every question had to be deliberate, every joke calculated, and every pause intentional. He couldn't simply rely on wit alone. He had to build a narrative that could stand against Trump's own unflinching confidence. The challenge was no longer about proving a rumor. It had become a battle of composure, presence, and influence. Then Trump raised the tension even higher. He hinted at the impossible stakes behind the challenge, making it clear that he was ready to push the limits. He didn't need to shout or threaten outright. His calm, measured tone, combined with the daring conditions he had set, conveyed the full weight of the challenge. This wasn't just about jokes or rumors. It was about control, perception, and dominance. Meyers now faced the dual challenge of keeping the audience engaged, while holding his own against a man who had never backed down from a confrontation. Meyers' response was clever and calculated. He didn't immediately attack. He allowed the tension to build, letting the audience absorb the stakes, feel the suspense, and wonder how he would respond. Then slowly he began to confront the rumors, not in a sensationalized way, but with sharp, pointed questions that highlighted the absurdity of the claims while maintaining credibility. He asked the kinds of questions that were easy for viewers to understand, but difficult for Trump to answer without revealing a contradiction or vulnerability. The room was silent at times as the weight of the challenge settled in. Even laughter had a nervous edge, a tension that reminded everyone that this wasn't just entertainment. It was a confrontation that tested courage, integrity, and nerve. Every pause, every glance between the two men carried meaning. Every smile, smirk, or nod could be interpreted, analyzed, and remembered. The challenge had become a psychological game, a test of patience and strategy, as much as it was about proving a point. By the time the audience fully realized the gravity of what they were witnessing, the challenge had already transformed into something far larger than either participant had initially intended. It was no longer about humor, no longer just about rumors. It had become a live demonstration of presence, power, and public perception. Seth Meyers was standing his ground, unflinching, while Trump maintained his air of authority, confident that the conditions he set would keep Meyers in check. And all the while, the audience felt the suspense growing. Everyone knew that at any moment the challenge could escalate. A single word, a single reaction could tip the balance. The stakes were no longer theoretical, they were real. And in that charged silence, the world waited, captivated, wondering how the confrontation would unfold and whether Meyers could survive the gauntlet Trump had thrown down. The challenge was clear. Success meant an apology. Failure meant humiliation. And through it all, the tension, suspense, and anticipation built to a level almost impossible to ignore. Every viewer could feel it. Every person in the audience could feel it. This was no ordinary confrontation. This was a moment that would define both men, a battle of nerve, strategy, and the raw power of presence. And as the first questions were asked and the first responses measured, it became painfully clear whatever happened next would be unforgettable. The moment had arrived. What began as a challenge, a simple dare, had now evolved into something far heavier. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Seth Meyers, a man known for humor, sharp commentary, and calculated wit, now faced a situation unlike anything he had encountered before. This was not a comedy sketch. This was a confrontation, direct and unfiltered, with the President of the United States. At first, the interaction carried the familiar rhythms of a late-night show. Light laughter, playful exchanges, and casual banter helped to ease some of the tension. Meyers cracked jokes about the rumors, subtly pointing out how absurd they sounded, while Trump responded with the confidence and bravado that had long defined his public persona. To anyone watching, it might have seemed like a normal segment, but beneath the surface, the air was taut with tension. Every word, every glance, every pause carried the weight of the stakes. Then, as the conversation continued, Seth Meyers shifted his approach. Humor alone would no longer suffice. The room quieted as he began asking pointed questions. Questions that cut through layers of pretense and challenged Trump on a personal level. He approached the rumors with precision, carefully phrasing each query to highlight inconsistencies without losing control of the narrative. It was clear he understood the power of this moment. This confrontation wasn't just about jokes. It was about truth, perception, and accountability. And then it happened. The question that everyone had feared and anticipated, the one that would define the confrontation, escaped his lips. "You married your own daughter, didn't you?" The words hung in the air like a striking bell. Silence descended upon the audience. People could barely breathe as they processed the gravity of the question. Trump, a man often unshakable in public, froze mid-smile. His expression went blank. He did not yell. He did not storm off. He simply stared, unblinking, unmoving. The room felt suspended in time, as though the world itself had paused to witness what would come next. No one had ever seen him like this in such a public setting. His usual confidence, his characteristic bravado, seemed to falter, replaced by a frozen calculation. And yet, he did not back down. The confrontation had reached a point where words alone could no longer dominate the moment. Silence became a weapon. Silence became a statement. Everyone watching felt the weight of it, from the audience in the room to the millions following the broadcast. Seth Meyers did not flinch. He held his ground, his eyes fixed, voice steady. The room was tense, every heartbeat echoing in the suspended silence. This was more than a joke. It was a test, a challenge of nerve, and an unspoken battle for control. The audience, captivated, realized that this moment was not scripted. It was real, it was raw, and the stakes were higher than anyone had imagined. For a brief moment, the world seemed to shrink around them. The focus narrowed to two men, one question, and a silence so complete it was almost unbearable. Every viewer could feel the tension, imagining what would come next. Would Trump respond? Would he deflect, deny, or attack? Or would the question linger unanswered, a mark of audacity on Meyers' side? And then, just as the suspense reached its peak, Meyers shifted slightly. He didn't push further verbally. Instead, he allowed the silence to amplify the moment, letting the audience dwell on the weight of what had just been asked. His strategy was clear. The question itself was the punchline, the revelation, and the statement. It forced a reaction. Without needing immediate confirmation, the audience, caught between disbelief and curiosity, realized the power of the confrontation. They felt it in their chest, a mixture of shock, intrigue, and almost physical tension. This was not entertainment in the usual sense. This was a human moment, raw and unfiltered, showing the fragility and resilience of public personas when challenged. Directly, Trump, still frozen, finally spoke, but not in anger, not in denial. He maintained a controlled calm, as if choosing each word with precision. His response, though measured, carried a subtle assertion of authority. He reminded everyone that no matter how audacious the question, he still commanded the narrative. It was a moment of psychological maneuvering where silence, gaze, and minimal response became as powerful as words. Meanwhile, Meyers remained composed. He understood that the confrontation was not just about asking the question, but about the timing, the pacing, and the audience's perception. He had forced a reaction, exposed vulnerability, and yet remained unshaken. Humor had led them here, yes, but courage and strategy had made the moment unforgettable. As the confrontation unfolded, the audience realized they were witnessing a rare phenomenon. A public figure, usually in control, confronted directly, stripped of defense, forced to process a challenge in real time. The tension was almost unbearable, a mix of curiosity, disbelief, and anticipation. Every moment felt like it could tip into chaos or revelation. And just when it seemed the confrontation had reached its peak, it became clear that the real shock was yet to come. Seth Meyers had more in store. He was not finished. The question had frozen Trump momentarily. Yes, but the next step promised to escalate the confrontation even further, to push the tension beyond what anyone thought possible. The audience leaned forward, hearts pounding. They had seen wit meet audacity, humor meet nerve, and words meet silence. But they had no idea what would happen next. And that was the brilliance of the confrontation. Every second stretched, every heartbeat counted, every glance held meaning. The moment had become a turning point, not just for the rumor, not just for the challenge, but for the very nature of public discourse. Seth Meyers had taken a risk, asked the unthinkable, and now in that frozen silence, the world waited, captivated, unsettled, and completely unable to look away. It was in that tension, in that unspoken understanding, that the confrontation truly lived. The question had been asked. The response had begun, and the outcome was still uncertain. The room was silent, the tension almost unbearable. Seth Meyers had asked the unthinkable question, and Trump had paused, expression unreadable, giving the audience a moment of frozen disbelief. For a heartbeat, it felt as though nothing else could happen, that the confrontation had reached its peak. But then, Meyers leaned forward, his hand sliding beneath the desk, and pulled out something that made every eye widen, every breath catch, and every heartbeat quicken. It was a large framed photo. At first glance, it appeared entirely ordinary, but as the audience's eyes adjusted, the impossible became visible. The image showed Donald Trump and Ivanka, dressed like a bride and groom, smiling as if caught in a wedding moment. It was impossible, shocking, and undeniably attention-grabbing. For a second, the room collectively gasped. The air felt charged, with disbelief, fear, and curiosity all at once. No one had expected this. The rumor had been whispered for weeks, dismissed by most, and yet, here it was, presented in a way that made it impossible to ignore. Even knowing it might be a fabrication or a manipulated image, the initial shock hit like a punch. The audience didn't just see a picture. They saw the culmination of weeks of speculation, rumors, and tension suddenly brought into the stark reality of the live confrontation. Seth Meyers didn't speak immediately. He let the silence stretch, letting the image settle in the minds of everyone watching. In that pause, the power of the moment grew. He had achieved something far greater than laughter or a clever remark. He had captured attention, provoked thought, and forced a reaction. Every eye in the audience was fixed on Trump, waiting for the impossible answer. And Trump, remarkably, did not react in panic. He did not explode, shout, or storm off. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, calm, measured, and entirely unshaken. The audacity of the moment, the way Meyers had presented his shocking, almost grotesque visual, did not break him. It was as if he had anticipated the drama, prepared for the spectacle, and had chosen to face it with confidence rather than fear. Trump spoke, his voice steady, even amused. "You know what? "Seth," he said, "that picture proves one thing. People will believe anything they see. But I regret nothing. Not my confidence, not this debate, not even giving you the spotlight you begged for tonight." The audience was stunned. For a moment, no one moved. People were unsure whether to laugh, applaud, or simply sit in silent disbelief. Meyers had executed a masterstroke of confrontation, but Trump's response reminded everyone of his ability to command attention, redirect narrative, and emerge unshaken, even when facing the most shocking challenge. The tension in the room shifted subtly as the drama became not just about the rumor or the image, but about power, control, and presence. It was a revelation in more ways than one. The audience realized that the confrontation was not about the truth of the rumor at all. It was about perception, about how moments could be manipulated, about the fine line between reality and spectacle. Meyers had pushed the boundaries, but Trump had navigated them with composure, proving that confidence and strategy often outweighed the initial shock of revelation. Even though the image was photoshopped, the emotional impact had been real. The audience had experienced the sudden rise of tension, the anticipation of a reaction, and the lingering uncertainty of what would come next. It was a masterclass in psychological engagement as the interplay between action, expectation, and response unfolded in real time. Meyers, for his part, remained composed. He had achieved the ultimate objective of the challenge: to provoke, to question, and to make the audience think. The picture, though fabricated, forced a confrontation with perception, rumor, and influence. And while Trump's calm deflected the immediate narrative, the audience could not ignore the audacity of the act. Meyers had dared to push limits, to test authority, and to place the most explosive question within reach of public scrutiny. The moment became larger than either man. It was no longer just a late-night challenge, no longer just a rumor or a joke. It had transformed into a commentary on human perception, power dynamics, and the weight of public attention. People realized that in this moment they were witnessing a unique cultural phenomenon, a confrontation in which strategy, nerves, and presence mattered as much as facts or logic. And yet, there was an aftershock still to come. The picture, the silence, and Trump's calm response had created a space in which the audience's imagination took over. What if the rumor were true? What if it were false? The uncertainty lingered, keeping every mind engaged, questioning, and talking. Meyers had introduced the twist, and Trump had met it head-on, but the audience remained suspended in the emotional ripple of the moment. The room gradually absorbed the gravity of what had just occurred. The picture had been a tool, a dramatic device, a catalyst for tension. Trump's responso had reinforced his control, yet it also acknowledged the extraordinary nature of the confrontation. Everyone realized that in the interplay of image, rumor, and challenge, the real drama was not in the truth of the claim, but in the courage to confront it, the audacity to provoke, and the skill to respond under pressure. By the end of this explosive exchange, one thing was certain: the confrontation had gone beyond humor, rumor, or spectacle. It had become a study in human behavior, a display of strategy and nerve, in a moment that would linger in the minds of those who witnessed it. The twist had delivered shock, suspense, and reflection, leaving the audience to ponder the delicate balance between reality, perception, and influence. And in that lingering silence, it was clear that neither side had truly lost. Meyers had provoked, challenged, and created drama. Trump had remained composed, confident, and unshaken. The audience, suspended between shock and admiration, realized that the confrontation had achieved something rare. It had made them participants in a moment of unpredictability, tension, and unforgettable spectacle. The cameras had stopped rolling, but the echo of the confrontation lingered like a storm that refused to pass. The audience, still seated, tried to process what they had just witnessed. What had begun as a simple late-night challenge had escalated into something far larger, a collision of personalities, nerves, and audacity that left everyone breathless. Seth Meyers had done what few could imagine. He had asked the unthinkable, taken the most audacious step, and pushed the boundaries of humor into the realm of direct confrontation. He had dared to question the President of the United States about rumors that most people wouldn't even whisper aloud. The courage alone was remarkable. Yet, he had also understood the stakes. This was not about ridicule or embarrassment. It was about clarity, perception, and holding someone accountable under pressure. In that sense, Meyers had succeeded in ways that words alone could not fully capture. Donald Trump, for his part, had responded with a calm that surprised even the most seasoned viewers. He did not explode, he did not retreat, and he did not falter. Instead, he turned the moment into a display of control, confidence, and strategic presence. His measured response to the shocking image, his assertion that people would believe anything they saw, and his insistence on walking away unshaken revealed the power of composure in the face of direct challenge. He had faced the storm and in his own way stood tall. The room slowly began to stir. Conversations started quietly at first as people whispered their thoughts and reactions. Some shook their heads in disbelief, trying to reconcile what they had seen with what they knew of the rumor. Others chuckled nervously at the audacity of the moment, realizing that the confrontation had been more than entertainment. It had been a masterclass in tension, strategy, and psychological interplay. Every viewer, whether in the audience or at home, felt the lingering pulse of that tension, the energy of a moment that was as unforgettable as it was unpredictable. What became clear almost immediately was that the confrontation had transcended its original purpose. It was no longer simply about rumors, comedy, or spectacle. It had become a study in influence and perception. Meyers had demonstrated that courage, wit, and clarity could provoke reflection and reaction, while Trump had shown that confidence, composure, and presence could redirect narrative and maintain authority even under extreme pressure. Together, they had created a moment that was equal parts shocking and instructive. Even as the audience processed the events, the broader implications began to emerge. People realized that the confrontation highlighted something deeper about human behavior, communication, and the nature of public discourse. It was a reminder that rumors, no matter how outrageous, have power, but so do the people who confront them, and the people who respond with calculated calm. It was a lesson in perception, a lesson in strategy, and a lesson in the unexpected ways that truth, fiction, and narrative can intersect. The aftershocks were felt beyond the studio. Conversations erupted across dinner tables, in offices, and among friends and family. People debated the audacity of Meyers' question, the strength of Trump's response, and the meaning behind the shocking image. Everyone wanted to make sense of the moment, but the truth was that its impact was not easily summarized. It existed in the tension, the reactions, and the lingering questions it left behind. The moment was a reminder that in life, as in this confrontation, clarity and courage often collide with strategy and presence, producing results that are as compelling as they are complex. For Meyers, the aftermath was a mix of relief and accomplishment. He had navigated a dangerous scenario, held his ground, and challenged a powerful figure in a way that was both memorable and impactful. He had tested his wit, his nerve, and his ability to command attention under pressure. And though the rumor itself was never proven true, the act of confronting it had made a statement that even in the face of formidable authority, audacity, and preparation can create moments that leave lasting impressions. Trump, meanwhile, had reinforced his reputation for control. His calm response, his refusal to be rattled, and his decision to walk away left an indelible mark. He had turned a potentially explosive moment into a demonstration of confidence and dominance. Even though the confrontation had pushed him into unfamiliar territory, he had managed to assert his narrative, leaving observers with the realization that presence, poise, and timing can be as powerful as words themselves. As the initial shock faded, reflection set in. The audience began to understand the real significance of the event. It wasn't just about the rumor. It wasn't just about the photoshopped image. It was about the dance between challenge and response, the tension between audacity and control, and the lasting impression that human behavior leaves when it is tested in extreme circumstances. Meyers and Trump, in their own ways, had created a moment that was more than entertainment. It had become a lesson, a spectacle, and a story that would be told for years to come. And when people looked back, they realized that this confrontation would not be forgotten. It was a moment that captured the unpredictability of human interaction, the delicate balance of humor and audacity, and the extraordinary ways in which perception shapes reality. It was proof that a single question, a single image, or a single act of courage can ripple far beyond the stage on which it occurs. By the time the audience left, the impact of the event was already settling in. People were still talking, still processing, and still marveling at the audacity of both men. It was a confrontation that would live in memory, a story retold countless times with a mix of disbelief, admiration, and reflection. And in that realization, one truth was undeniable. The aftermath of this moment was as powerful, as instructive, and as unforgettable as the confrontation itself. The challenge had ended. The reveal had passed, but the lesson lingered. Courage, wit, strategy, and composure. These were the forces that shaped the night, and they were the forces that left the world watching, thinking, and talking long after the cameras went dark. Who do you think walked away stronger? Meyers, who exposed the image, or Trump, who walked off unfazed? Drop your thoughts below. I'll be reading every one of them.